Guys up to?
Gobta, without a doubt the best in town at popping up at the exact wrong time, executed this skill perfectly by waking up.
You're all right?
Oh, you have to listen to this. He replied with a carefree smile.
I was swimming across the river, and this kind voice said I had obtained resist poison or something like that. So I felt a whole lot better, and then I woke up.
Something told me it was a lucky thing he didn't make it all the way across that river. I thought it'd be kinder if I didn't say that.
Wow.
Resist poison, huh?
That's pretty neat. I don't even have that one.
Oh really? Ooh, neato.
Gobta seemed honestly proud. But his knack for terrible timing had already sealed his fate. Ha, Ranga growled. Very well. If you are capable of defeating one among us whom we deem to be worthy, we will listen to your story. Then he motioned toward Gobta. I knew he would.
Wha? He protested, eyes wide open.
What are you? But it had been decided. Which was good for me. I wasn't sure who to pick, myself.
Everyone on our side was ready to beat the crap out of this lizard man, their eyes lowered in a threatening stance. In a way, it helped me keep my own head cool. Whenever someone gets visibly pissed off, it tends to put the brakes on everyone else in the room. Really, though. Ranga can be pretty mean, too, huh?
I could see it in his eyes, even. He was putting Gobta up as a sacrificial lamb.
It wouldn't exactly be honorable to hurt this envoy, but if he struck first, that was enough of an excuse.
I imagined that was Ranga's way of thinking about it. Clever of him. Wonder where he got that from. Are you sure?
Gable asked me, a triumphant look.
Because I would be happy to challenge you instead.
Though, perhaps you'd prefer to have one of your underlings step up for you, rather than reveal to the world how powerless you are.
Now he was just dissing me.
He seriously thought I was running some large-scale con on Ranga and the rest.
I wanted to punch him, full strength.
My head was distinctly no longer cool. Don't show him any mercy, Gobta.
Get him.
Lose, and I'll have Shion cook a 5-course meal for you.
Wait a second, sir.
I guess you've already made your decision, but I'd like some kind of reward if I win, at least.
And please, anything but Shion's food. I do not appreciate this line of conversation, Shion sullenly added. He was right, though. I had the stick, now I needed a carrot.
I figured a taste of Shion's homespun efforts would be enough to make him fight like his life depended on it. I knew it was pointless, I mean, he had no chance, but I wanted to think of a reward, then.
All right, I said.
In that case, I'll have Kurobe make a weapon for you.
How's that sound?
Oh really?
Come on, Gobta, have I ever lied to you?
And no, not lie, exactly, maybe kind of withheld things from me sometimes, but...
You're just imagining it.
Am I? Oh, all right.
This was why I liked talking with Gobta. He was so easy to work with.
Sensing our conversation was over, Ranga threw a signal my way.
I nodded in reply. If you wish to lend us your power, he said to Gable, then show us what you possess first. You may begin.
With that, the battle kicked off, Gobta, ready for anything, and Gable, calmly carrying his spear. Gobta had a cavalry lance on him, too, making it a duel between two long-range weapons. He had no chance, to be sure.
His usual weapon of choice was a dagger.
Humph, Gable replied, lecturing his foe despite the fact that the fight had already started.
You may be more than a mere goblin, but even a hobgoblin is no threat to me. We are the lizardmen, the mighty descendants of dragons. Aren't you coming?
Well, here I come, then.
Ignoring the boast, Gobta hurled his spear right at Gable. He was serious about this, more serious than I expected.
Impudent fool, Gable listlessly muttered as he batted down the missile.
That, apparently, was exactly what Gobta wanted.
For just an instant, Gable's attention was focused on the thrown spear, and the hobgoblin took that instant to disappear.
Wait. What?
If my eyes weren't deceiving me, Gobta had just executed a perfect shadow motion move to hide.
Perfect enough that even Gable lost sight of him. "Where are you?" he shouted, furtively looking around. But by then, the battle had already been won.
Flying out of the shadow behind Gable's back, Gobta flung himself into a midair spin as he executed a kick.
I figured Gable had no idea what happened.
The rear attack came as a total surprise, and he took it straight to the back of his neck, immediately causing him to black out.
Gobta had aimed right where neither Gable's armor nor his helmet could protect him, and he aimed well.
Even the stoutest built of lizardmen couldn't hold up against a direct attack on such a vulnerable collection of nerves. His scales would keep the blow from turning lethal, but he would no doubt take a while to recover.
Which meant that Gobta actually won. It is settled. The victor is Gobta.
Ranga's proclamation was almost drowned out by the cheers and applause from the ogres.
Gobta soaked it up for a moment or two.
Man. Gobta, of all people, dominating a warrior lord lizardman? I figured Gable was B+ or so, and he was down in one stroke.
I had to hand it to Gobta.
He'd matured.
I was shocked, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one.
Well done, Gobta, Ranga said as he nodded approvingly.
I always knew you had it in you.
Yes,
chimed Rigard. Excellent.
You have shown the world what hobgoblins are truly capable of. He might just be right, Shion observed.
I think I'll forgive what you said a moment ago after all. A masterstroke, Benimaru said. You have grown stronger than when we last fought.
Indeed, Hakuro said, eyes sharp and focused on Gobta.
Quite impressive. I wonder how he may respond to further training. Damn.
Being complimented by the likes of Hakuro?
This day might just change Gobta's life. If that old taskmaster of an ogre sage saw potential in him, I was all for it.
It had helped divert Hakuro's attention away from me and training, at least.
Though. Wait a second. Was everyone else here expecting him to win? I took another look around, and that was that vibe right now. I was the only one who doubted him. Better make amends for that. I knew how to read a room.
Yeah, good job, Gobta.
That blew me away. I'll make Kurobe start on your weapon before nightfall.
So what about Gable and his lizardman entourage?
The warrior lord had no external injuries. He was knocked out but otherwise unaffected. As for his men, they had been frozen in place before they even had a chance to form a cheering section. They still had no idea what had just happened.
Hey, we won, okay?
I yelled at them.
And I gotta turn down the offer, too, all right? If you want help fighting the orcs, we'll think about that, but for today, you mind leaving us in peace?
And don't forget to take him with you. That was enough to stir them to action.
And with that, our attempts at a cross-species summit were over. I was happy to see that idiot go, really, but we still needed to formulate a future plan. I gathered us together in a small hut I had built next to the largest lodging quarters in town for meeting purposes, ordering Rigard to call for everyone else we needed. I will summon them at once, he said, sending Gobta out for them as I used thought communication to get CI over. Most of the town's important figures were there. Among hobgobs, there were Rigard, Riga, Rugged, Rigurd, Rogard, and Lilina. They were joined by the dwarf Kaijin and the ogre mages Benimaru, Shuna, Hakuro, Shion, and CI. 12 in total, not counting me, and they encompassed most of the town's managerial duties, apart from production. Kaijin represented the town's building and production interests. Lilina handled management, and Rigard, Rugged, Rogard, and Rigurd were the top political brass. Rigard was in charge, and the other three were his ministers, although I hadn't assigned them concrete duties yet. Better get on top of that. Benimaru and Hakuro were our military, CI our intelligence, and Riga our security. This meant our government now consisted of 6 departments, with the military and covert ops sections newly founded by me. We were still weak as an organization, but it had worked well enough so far. Once the framework was in place, it'd be easier to fill out the details over time.
For now, at least, we had roofs over our heads and food in our bellies.
Thinking about it, Riga was doing a damn good job for us all.
The grease on the wheels, I suppose.
Benimaru was deliberating over who to recruit for the army. I heard he and Riga were discussing a list of possible candidates they could take from the security detail.
Which was good.
I'd only just appointed him, but I would need some action on that fast, what with the orcs and lizardmen running around. It was a heavy burden to place on Benimaru, but I was sure he'd do his best.
Lilina was a hard worker. Quick-witted, too.
She was our city manager of sorts, but in terms of her duties, she was mainly responsible for our agricultural efforts. She had picked up some wild potato plants and succeeded in cultivating them. They grew quickly and provided a great deal of nutrients, which did wonders for our food situation. She was also involved with things like taming magical beasts for livestock and building fish hatcheries, a pretty decent range of projects. This was in addition to managing all our stocks, the things we made, the resources we harvested, the materials we gathered. The Secretary of Agriculture, Forestry, Water, and Livestock, all in one.
We were still small, which was what made that possible, but going forward, we'd have to adapt with the times.
If we started building trade relationships with the human race, I'd love to pick up some vegetable seedlings from them.
By then, Lilina would probably have too much on her plate, so I'd need to appoint more managers.
The rest of the gobliners were pitching in, too, learning sewing from Shuna and so forth.
We had a lot of winning people among them, Haruna included. I figured we were in good hands.
On the architecture and production front, I was still leaving well near everything to Kaijin. He was trained as a blacksmith, but after collaborating with Kurobe, he had kind of drifted upward to the position of floor supervisor. They had divided their workload pretty well, as I saw it, Kurobe at the forge, Kaijin working on new ideas. We're still pretty busy putting everything together, he told me, but once things settle down, I'd like to devote myself more to creative things. I had a feeling Kurobe would be joining him before long, once the current wave of weapons production wrapped up. Hell, I wouldn't mind joining them, even. But before that, I just needed things to, as Kaijin put it, settle down. Once CI returned from his latest recon trip, the entire gang was at the conference room.
Time to kick this off. With my signal, CI began his report. It was generally divided into 3 parts: the state of things in the other goblin villages, what was going on in the marshlands, and the orcs' advance. Each area had 2 CI clones devoted to it, nimbly gathering intel. A few were still out in the field, rooting around for more. We all fell silent, listening to his tale. First, the goblin villages. Most had affiliated themselves with Gable, warrior lord of the lizardmen. Ah, the one who just paid us a visit. They're following that idiot? Fickle bastards. The goblins who refused to this had run for the hills in a state of panic, several attempting to flee to human territory. No one gave them much of a chance at survival. It was one thing if they lived in humble forest villages in uncharted lands, indeed another if they crossed the border. It's natural for anyone to want to keep their homelands protected, and the humans would undoubtedly give them no quarter. I didn't know what kind of firepower the nearby humans had, but I was sure it'd make quick work of exhausted goblin stragglers. Which meant the goblins had little choice but to live hidden in secrecy, which didn't exactly paint a rosy picture for their future. CI had some more information on Gable for us, too. He had apparently gathered the fighter goblins from the assorted villages to assemble a force some 7,000 strong. They were now camped at the foot of the mountain range near us. Quite a number. They had accepted the exact offer given to us, safety against the orcs, in exchange for whatever food resources they had. I suppose it was the best decision, but with all their food in the hands of others, they were doomed to starve, regardless of how the orc battle turned out. It was completely careless, really, thoughtless of the village elders who agreed to the proposal. Guess they figured it was better than getting their heads caved in by an Orcish axe. Or were they betting that a substantial number would survive the war? That there'd be enough to keep going afterward? It was something we all would have to consider, too. This town wasn't complete yet, but I couldn't bear the thought of abandoning it at this point. If we let the orcs invade this far in, they'd ransack the surrounding forest and make it hard to keep ourselves fed.
If we wanted to retain the lives we enjoyed now, we'd have to repel the orcs, and repel them at the marshlands, not here.
Speaking of the marshes, the Lizardman chief had been summoning some armies of his own.
A force of 10,000 had already been assembled, safe and well fed from the fish in nearby Lake Sisu. They were holed up in a maze of natural caves and caverns, ready to resist an Orcish siege for as long as necessary. So they thought the orcs were that much of a threat, then? The Lizardmen, a strong bunch of fighters despite Gable's little display, were already in a state of near-total war preparedness, to the point where they were even recruiting the weaker goblins. Finally, I asked about the orcs.
The orc force's number.
CI paused for a moment. Approximately 200,000 fighters.
200,000? Someone shouted. I think it was a few thousand that laid waste to the ogre's fort.
So you mean to say that the force that attacked our home was merely a fraction of the entire army? Indeed, CI reported.
That is what I found in my investigations. We believe the total number involved to be 200,000.
The main force is working its way along the Great Emeld River from the south, covering a relatively broad range as they do. My estimate is based strictly on the length of their marching forces and the width of the roads they are using, but based on that, they can number no fewer than 150,000. I've confirmed that some squadrons affiliated with them are making inroads here and there into the forest as well, so I would warn against lowballing our estimate. A massive parade of orcs, occupying entire roads for miles on end, as far as the eye could see.
Do we know where they're headed?
Yes, my lord. The force is aiming for the marshes that spread around Lake Sisu, working straight through the Lizardman territory.
However, with their current trajectory, they will reach human territory immediately afterward.
It is unclear where their ultimate objective lies, but if they continue along a straight line, they will be unable to avoid confrontation with a number of different human kingdoms.
Wow! What are they thinking?
Wait a second, if all they wanted was control over the forest, would they simply stop once they destroyed the Lizardmen? What did they want anyway? What do you think about all this, CI? Are the orcs seeking to destroy the Lizardmen?
Or will they continue their conquest into human lands? It is hard to say as of yet, my lord. I suppose not. I had only a dim idea of the geography involved anyway.
Well, I think finding out about that should be the next priority. Do we have a map or something handy, CI? What do you mean by dope map, sir? Huh? Dot.
This was a bit of a surprise. The concept of a map was seemingly alien to most everyone in the room. Kaijin, bless his soul, knew what I was talking about. He knew, but he didn't have a lead on one we could purchase.
Apparently, the way the world was at this point in its history, maps were still considered confidential military intelligence.
Well, so be it.
I had the assembled members line up a number of wooden boards on the table and then craft something simple for me so I could see where things were, relative to one another.
Most monsters had telepathy, which let them share a pool of information with one another.
This was helpful, but it had the adverse effect of delaying the development of printed, or recordable, media. Hakuro started by drawing the general area around the ogre homeland, using what he heard from his grandfather as reference. The lack of paper was really starting to bother me, but I had more boards brought in so we could draw up the region around our town. Thought communication came in handy for this, letting people pick up on exactly what one another was picturing in their minds. Too handy, really, given how it let people exchange accurate information without putting it down on paper. I wouldn't necessarily call it an improvement over life on Earth. It was a dilemma, honestly, even if it posed no hindrance to day-to-day monster life. It was a given that humans were a lot better at transmitting knowledge down to future generations than monsters. That was the core behind developing a civilization. After all, the monsters around me might dismiss this map-making as a needless extra step for now, but I was sure they'd thank me later.
I had the sage collate all the information people were feeding me with their minds. Once I had it all, I neatly jotted it down on the wooden boards. The result was a fairly serviceable map.
The distances and such were bare estimates, Of course, but it could stand up to practical use well enough. Sucked that I had to waste a bunch of time on this map before we got to the main subject, though.
On to business.
So this is what a map is, I said. A way of showing what the land looks like that everyone can understand.
I want you to look at this as I speak to you. Everyone gathered around the boards in the middle of the table. I linked it with everyone via thought communication to ensure we were all focused on the same thing. Okay.
I'm going to use this map to predict how the lizardmen and orcs are going to act.
We're trying to figure out what the orcs are thinking here.
If we can grasp that, it'll be easier to plot our next move.
They all nodded.
I had CI place a small piece of wood on the orc force's current location. I had written ORC on it in big letters, like a game piece. From the center of the forest of Jura, there were 3 basic directions an army as large as the orcs could go.
All involved tracing the Ameld River, which stretched out from the Canet Mountains.
This river forked into 2 tributaries near the center of the forest, one flowing into Lake Sisu. The larger branch moved upward in a north-south orientation, traversing nearly the entire continent. Toward the end, it made a slow curve before dumping out into the ocean to the east. The forest hugged this river for much of its outward flow, and generally speaking, the area east of it was occupied by the Eastern Empire, human lands. After exiting the woods, the Great Ameld fed the fertile plains that were ruled over by demon lords.
That plurality was important.
Shizu had said as much as well, that the demon lord Leon was just one of them.
It sounded a bit odd, the idea of multiple demon lords, but there you go.
For all I knew, Leon and the one who gave Rigard's son his name were 2 different people. The topic deserved more exploration, but that would have to wait.
We were trying to suss out the orcs' invasion route and ultimate objective.
According to CI's report, after leaving their habitat near the Demon Lord lands, the orcs had been making their way along the Great Ameld. It was the only route large enough to hold an entire army, but apparently, they had also been sending squadrons into the forest, picking off the stronger monsters that might threaten them along the way, including the ogres. They were after food, I wagered, but it still seemed odd.
What do you think?
I asked as I moved other wooden pieces around to simulate the orcs overtaking the ogre fort. In what way, my lord? I mean, why would they send a splinter force off like this? Why couldn't they just march right through the forest? Moving such a large force, Hakuro said, would be very difficult, what with all the trees in the way.
Made sense. But in that case, why raise our homeland at all?
Benimaru asked. If we weren't in the way of the main force, why couldn't they have left us be? A good question, actually, Hakuro replied.
They were right.
The orcs didn't seem to have any motivation for picking off higher-level foes not directly in their path of advance. They could seize their food stores, yes, but if that was the sole objective, they paid an extremely dear price for it. The orcs numbered several thousand, but that was still a pittance compared to the main force. Why devote so relatively few fighters toward such an obviously tough opponent? Was food really the only reason they were willing to accept so many casualties? Remember, Benimaru said, they didn't even offer to hire us as mercenaries. I can only conclude they were prepared to kill us all from the moment they arrived.
Shuna nodded. Very true. My sense threat extra skill told me as much.
They were fully hostile toward us, nothing more, nothing less.
So the orcs wanted the ogres dead. And that wasn't all.
Judging by the routes the main force and this splinter team took, Hakuro said, eyes focused on the map, they would likely regroup in the marshlands. Everyone looked down as he moved 2 ORC-labeled pieces forward.
He was right.
Proceeding in a straight line, they met right at the marshlands the lizardmen called home. A region large enough for the main orc force to regroup and prepare for the battle ahead, assuming they didn't mind the lack of dry land to work with. So they'd definitely run into the lizardmen sooner or later, right? Did they want to eradicate them so they could be king of the forest or whatever?
Put that way, I'm not so sure. It makes little sense. Or maybe they're in cahoots with a demon lord, like you said?
They are receiving support, no doubt about that, but I cannot say whether it is demon lord support.
We had best not jump to conclusions.
Okay, but even if they are working with someone, what does annihilating the main power brokers in the forest achieve?
Everyone on hand offered their own response.
In the end, though, no one had a definite idea about what the orcs wanted, the most important question. Plus, Shuna whispered, how are the orcs feeding an army of 200,000?
The observation made everyone freeze for a moment. How? Benimaru ventured.
That's what they're seizing food supplies for, no?
Then he fell silent, realizing how dubious that sounded. Shuna had a point. It just didn't seem right.
CI, did the Splinter Force have a supply team with them?
I did not see any, no.
The main force appeared to have a caravan carrying food supplies in the rear, but
indeed, not nearly enough of one, in terms of size.
Nowhere near enough to keep an army of 200,000 nourished. Marching near the river eliminated any worries about fresh water, but they were essentially unable to supply themselves.
Whatever food they had would dwindle quickly.
Both forces needed something, didn't they? I doubted the orcs had perfected some just-in-time method of supplying a full military force nobody was aware of, but I also doubted they would just let all those orcs starve while they fought. And if they didn't bother to supply the Splinter Force, no way they'd seize the ogre's food, then just deliver it all back to the main army.
They had their own mouths to feed.
And Splinter Force or not, we were still talking several thousand grown orcs, and that was an awful lot of people to force into potential starvation.
I noticed CI step up to say something, only to catch himself. What is it? I pressed. Did you want to say something?
This is just speculation on my part, but I wonder if, perhaps, they were foraging upon the bodies of those who died of starvation or battle wounds. I say this because, while I conducted thorough investigations of the battlefields they fought in, I found not a single corpse.
What? Benimaru exclaimed.
Including our own homeland? Yes.
There was absolutely nothing, and no one, left. How? Oh no. The ogre mages were at a loss for words.
Oof.
I could see why. That's what orcs are like? Just imagining it made me queasy. That's just too hard to accept.
They are omnivorous, I know, but... Really? CI-eyed Rigid and Kaijin stoically.
It is simply speculation, he repeated.
But wherever they were known to be, I found not a single corpse, and our homeland was completely devoid of anything.
That is the full truth. And that brings to mind a certain skill. He stopped, and his face twisted. No. Benimaru shouted.
An Orc Lord? Indeed. I have not confirmed it, but I cannot deny the chance that an Orc Lord has appeared. I have, at least, confirmed the presence of high-order Orc Knights.
Our attackers, likely. Indeed. They would have to be, judging by their strength.
I could imagine Orc generals among them, even.
That would certainly explain everything.
The ogre mages' faces grew more and more concerned. They seemed to know who this Orc Lord was, not that it meant anything to me, Kaijin, or the other hobgoblins. Whoa, who's this Orc Lord guy?
Kaijin asked, finally unfreezing himself. Could you maybe include us in this conversation, please?
Yeah, I added.
If you don't mind?
That was our first insight into exactly how fearsome the Orc Lord was.
To put it briefly, an Orc Lord was a unique monster with advanced leadership skills. They appeared one at a time, out of the blue, once every few hundred years, to spread chaos across the world.
One bad hombre, in other words.
What made them so nefarious was the skill they were born with, the unique skill known simply as ravenous.
It allows the caster to make his allies devour everything around them, like a swarm of locusts, afflicting them with a severe hunger they never have any hope of sating. It sounded like torture for the victims, but it had great benefits for the caster. It very efficiently removed all organic matter from entire regions at once, transforming it into energy for yourself. And even if it starved your people, hell, because it starved them, the ultimate effect was tremendously powerful. But the scariest thing of all was that whatever monsters the hordes consumed in their mad dash for sustenance, their skills would be transferred over to the caster. Monster powers, physical attributes, even skills.
It wasn't a sure thing every time, but the more monsters you consumed, the better your chances. In other words,
the orcs aren't trying to eradicate the forest's high-level monsters at all.
They're trying to take their powers for their own? Silence fell upon the room. It indicated, once and for all, that my compatriots had already made that conclusion. We all paused for a few moments.
The air had grown heavy around us, whether we had solid evidence of an orc lord in our midst or not.
We weren't helpless against this threat, of course.
This monster had appeared on the scene before, multiple times, and there was already a known strategy for dealing with them.
And this is? I impatiently asked.
The ogre mages responded by giving one another awkward looks. Kaijin and Rigid stared at them, a tad put off.
It embarrasses me to say it, Shuna finally began, but the orc lords of the past have all been defeated by human efforts.
Ravenous is a powerful unique skill, no doubt about it, but it works only by seizing the powers of those the orc lord defeats. While monsters may have intrinsic skills or other magic-oriented effects an orc lord can take for itself, humans bear none of that. They bear arts, not skills, and those are strictly the fruits of practice and effort. That's what enables a human nation, or band of nations, to defeat such a threat. Huh. Don't feed the beast, and it won't grow, huh?
I suppose they hesitated to say it because it meant we'd have to get humans involved, sooner or later. Well, at least we had something to go on now.
We had a general idea of the skills the orc lord might have seized, and we could find ways to counter them.
It might not be that much of a threat yet, assuming it hadn't been around for too long.
Maybe this'll be easier than I thought?
Maybe not. He already had a Night Corps, for one, not to mention that 200,000 strong horde of slavering, starving orcs.
That, and whatever organization fronted the funds to equip and armor all those guys.
No point being too optimistic.
If it gained any intelligence boosts through Ravenous, it could even become a demon lord in time, I bet.
Bad news all around. Definitely should have gotten to him quicker. But well.
Right now would have been a great time for some lofty hero to show up, but I didn't have one handy, to my regret.
All right. Let's see if this orc lord exists or not, before anything else.
If one's really been born, I suppose we should get a message over to Cabal and the rest of my adventurer friends. Yes, my lord.
Rigid nodded at the idea.
They had mentioned they were affiliated with a group, the Guild, they called it, that provided assignments. Maybe the Guild could help us out. If Cabal provided an inch I was expecting more pushback, really, but none made itself known. Cabal and his friends were certainly kind to us before, at least.
No stereotyping or the like.
I figured I could sell a few hunks of magisteel I had left to raise the money for the Guild's help. They might turn down passing monsters, but they couldn't turn down the right price, that, or I could just have the dwarf brothers negotiate on our behalf. An orc lord would threaten the humans as much as us.
We had a lot of chips to bargain with.
In fact, if we knew that humans would play a key role in this, perhaps we should send a message out ASAP. If the lizardmen were already goners, the orcs would very likely be going after human kingdoms next. And whether they could feed off humans or not, 200,000 orcs would be a life or death threat to pretty much any nation out there.
For now, we needed more information.
That was my watchword as I continued the conference, but suddenly, CI stiffened, wincing.
What is it?
Well, he began, one of my replication clones has made contact with someone who insists upon communicating with you, Sir Rimuru.
What do you think?
Contact? And they name-dropped me, even?
Who the heck?
I still didn't have many acquaintances in this world, really. Was it Cabal, maybe, speak of the devil? Nah. It took them several weeks to travel here from their home base, they said.
Over a month's round trip, not possible. This contact has not given me a name, my lord. She simply seeks to send you a message, and she is quite adamant. She is a dryad.
Everyone's eyebrows whipped up in surprise. A pretty well-known monster, I guess.
No. Rigid exclaimed.
It has been several decades since a dryad has last made itself known, has it not?
They have practically vanished.
Why would one appear now?
To the hobgoblins, they were all but mythical figures.
And judging by the ex-ogre CI's response, they must have been pretty high level. One who had spotted and made contact with CI, despite how gifted he was at concealing his replications.
That proved the caliber we were dealing with. Better not get this dryad angry, then. All right. I'll meet with her. Guide her over here. It would appear my thought was correct.
Not long after I gave consent, the conference room door opened to reveal a new figure. It had not lost a second to the CI replicant, even when he used shadow motion to guide him back.
Calling her and it would be rude. She was a woman, and a beautiful one.
Her hair was green, her skin light, her figure well-toned, chiseled, even, like a Nordic goddess. Her luxuriant lips were a shade of light blue, matched perfectly with her deep blue eyes. She looked about 20 years old by human standards, but human she definitely was not. She was semi-transparent, and any observer could tell that her body had no weight or actual physical presence. Dryads were, indeed, descended from the fairy races, as close to a form of spiritual life as one was likely to ever witness. I later learned they served as the guardians of the treants, the living tree people that were another high-level presence around the forest. In terms of ranking, they were easily A or better, up there with Ifrit, and no doubt a terrifying presence for Rigid and the hobgobs.
But what did she want? The conference table was enveloped in silence.
The dryads, long-lived though they were, rarely left their holy sanctuaries. They were heralded by some as the wardens of the whole forest of Jura, and only a few lucky ones would see one for themselves. They were fabled to exact divine punishment upon the wicked, those who damaged the forests. Benimaru and the other ex-ogres reacted much the same way as Rigid.
But the dryad didn't let it faze her.
She sized up the room for a moment before locking her eyes upon my figure.
My greetings to you, leader of the monsters, and your followers. I am Thraini, a dryad. It is nice to meet you all. She smiled, like a bud sprouting into a flower.
That was all it took for me to wonder, am I being too wary of her, perhaps? She had a fairy-like beauty, that was absolutely true.
You too.
My name's Raimaru. We can keep it casual here, okay?
None of that leader of the monsters crap. I hated nicknames enough on Earth.
I didn't want any here, so I made sure to do away with it before the rest of the room could introduce themselves. So, I said, still trying to overcome my embarrassment, what did you want to see me for?
Thank you.
I have come here to discuss the events taking place in this forest, events which, I imagine, you all are aware. As one of the Forest of Jura's appointed wardens, I cannot allow this series of calamities to go unaddressed, and so I have appeared before you.
I do so because I hope to join in your conference. She nodded and turned to each of the participants before turning back to me.
Thraini, huh?
A named monster, then. High level, no doubt. But why here? Benimaru dared to ask. Surely there are races more powerful than the goblins you could have turned to for assistance.
This is the most powerful outpost in the nearby region, the dryad replied. The others no longer exist, their people now affiliated with the lizard man known as Gable. The treants are incapable of moving from location to location and thus interact little with other races. If they were blighted by an outside enemy or natural disaster, there would be little they could do to defend themselves. We dryads are granted permission to travel to the outside world only in these spiritual forms, and I regret there are but few of us.
If the root cause of all this were to attack the Trent community we share our lives with, we lack the numbers to provide them an effective defense. That is why I wish to tap your strength, if I may. She closed with another cheerful smile.
In contrast to her astounding looks, the way she spoke was oddly calming. They must have been a long-lived race, indeed, she must have seen a lot over the years.
The issue was whether she could be believed.
Someone as strong as Ifrit, several of them, living in this community or whatever, not even they could handle the orcs. Did she want to use us as bait, maybe?
Or was there some other goal? You speak of a root cause, Hakuro said. Does that mean you know what is happening in the forest now? I do, Thraney responded without hesitation.
An Orc Lord is invading it with a vast force in tow.
The freely given revelation plunged the conference room into silence once more.
Should we take that to mean, Benimaru finally said, you have confirmed the Orc Lord's presence?
You may. And if they were to turn their sights upon our community of treants, we have no effective way to resist them.
They cannot move from where they are rooted, and their mystical magic can do little against an Orc race unafraid of death. We could perhaps sear them with flame magic, rendering them into ashes, but that could backfire upon the tree people, and none have mastered it anyway. And anything more powerful than that, anything that could strike an entire army at once, would wipe the treants out with it.
That.
Thraney paused, sizing us all up before once again focusing her gaze squarely upon me. In addition, we have found that a high-level magic born is working behind the scenes to support this Orc Lord. As Dryads, we must prepare for this. We are unsure which demon lord might be behind them all, but we are not interested in letting these intruders do whatever they like with our forest. Her eyes seemed to sparkle even more as she spoke. As one of the most powerful creatures of the forest, Thraney exuded a presence in the room that was electric.
It was like energy coursed across her entire body.
Well, we'd like to help, but what did you want us to do, exactly?
I would like you to defeat the Orc Lord, Thraney immediately replied. This rendered everyone speechless.
Whoa, I protested, this monster is, like, crazy-ass strong, isn't it?
Why would someone like me have to take him on? Thraney responded with a quizzical look.
But the ogre mages here are intending to fight against the orcs, though, aren't they? And you plan to contribute to the effort yourself, right?
You were the one who extended a hand to save all those defenseless goblins, not long ago. I had thought you would show similar kindness to us and the treants. She smiled again. I wasn't sure what sources she was tapping, but Thraney seemed to know a remarkable amount about what happened in this forest.
She must have looked at my assorted exploits in this world and concluded that I was a sort of omnipotent Good Samaritan.
Perhaps the secluded lives the Dryads led caused them to assume the best of everybody they met.
Did it ever occur to her that I might stab her in the back? The smile made it impossible to tell, but as our eyes met, I could feel it in my gut. This was no liar in front of me.
I decided to trust my instincts.
If her story was true, we really did have an Orc Lord on our hands, as well as a high-level magic born lurking around behind him. I didn't know exactly how I could contribute to the cause yet, but if she trusted in me, I might as well repay the favor.
I took a deep breath. But before I could speak.
Of course. To our leader, Sir Raimaru, the Orc Lord is no more of a threat than a passing cockroach. Shion stole my thunder, a bold look of determination on her face. Geez.
I'm not a god or anything. Wish he could have conferred with me first. And why is it already a given that I'm the one doing the orc slaying around here? Before I could protest, Thraney gave me another smile.
Oh!
She exclaimed. Then it's just as I have heard.
I wish you great luck against the Orc Lord, then.
And that was that.
I had been more or less pushed into the Orc Lord slaying role by Shion, but that didn't mark the end of the conference.
We kept going, while Thraney joined us for the rest.
On the map, in the marshland area, was a wooden board with Lizardman written on it. Behind it, another one marked Goblins. In front of it was the spot where the two different orc contingents were going to cross paths.
Putting it all down on the map like this made the sheer size of the orc force stark in our minds, but my eyes were turned elsewhere.
You know, I said, if that idiot from before decided to stage an attack on the Lizardman HQ right now, he'd seize it pretty darn quick, wouldn't he?
Indeed.
Gable, the so-called Lizardman envoy. If he decided to raid the Lizardman's home turf while their main force was busy tangling with the orcs, he'd be greeted with only skeletal resistance. The caverns would be his in the blink of an eye.
And the goblin forces were already in perfect position for it.
You're sure these are the right positions, CI?
I am, sir, CI said. The goblins are encamped in the plains by the foot of the mountain range.
If they deploy their forces from there, they will do so right in the spot indicated. I trusted him at his word, but why were they just sitting around there instead of joining up with the other lizardmen?
That was the thing.
But I had to remind myself that I was making some pretty big assumptions, too.
Gable had no reason to attack his fellow lizardmen.
The odd way he chose to position his forces gave me pause, but there was little reason to dwell on it, I thought.
Maybe I'm overthinking it.
I'm kind of an amateur at this, so.
No, interrupted Hakuro, eyes sparkling. I think you may have a point.
If the main lizardman force is deployed directly in front of them, it would be easiest to try to strike from the rear. But the orcs clearly don't have the time to try to circle behind them, and even if they attempted such folly, they could easily be attacked and routed from both sides while their lines are stretched thin.
There is no reason to keep an army here. But what would the point be? Benimaru countered.
Even if the goblins defeated the lizardmen, all they'd have waiting for them is death at the hands of the orc onrush.
Perhaps. But Gable seemed to style himself as a leader. He may want to seize the position of chief for himself. It is possible.
And really, I see no other reason for him to position his forces here.
Gable was certainly confident.
Dreaming big.
But was he really that brazen?
If that's what you think, I said, if you think it's possible, then that's all the more reason why we can't team up with him.
Nobody offered any disagreement.
Do you believe Gable may be rebelling against his own people? Thraney asked.
Yeah, it looks possible, the way this map is showing it.
He offered to have us join his army, but I don't think that's such a good idea anymore.
I see. Perhaps there is someone compelling him to do this.
I will investigate.
I appreciated the gesture. But if she was covering Gable for us, what should the rest of us be doing now?
I would very much like to forge an alliance with the lizardmen, Hakuro said. By ourselves, our numbers are too low. I would hate to leave them alone and defenseless, besides.
Nods around the table. Nobody seemed to have any concerns about that. But whether we have an alliance or not, we're never gonna outnumber the orcs, I countered.
You sure they wouldn't just treat the offer like an insult?
The hobgoblins seemed to view that as a problem. The ogre mages laughed them off.
So Rimuru, you worry far too much. Hakuro commented.
Each one of us is as powerful as an entire army.
I highly doubt they would look down upon the likes of us.
I thought he was giving himself far too much credit. It sounded like something Gable would say, really.
But apparently, he meant it. I will go and negotiate with them myself, Ci said. Is it all right if I speak with the Lizardman Chief on your behalf, Sir Rimuru?
I sized him up as he awaited my reply. He certainly seemed confident. I wasn't sure where it came from. But he seemed worth relying on. The map had just told us to expect a clash between orcs and lizardmen before long.
Assuming that was true, we had more time to save this town than I first thought. Having a general idea of the near future helped everyone else calm down a bit, too.
Right. So we're gonna take two different tacks. I'll lead an advance force over to the lizardmen, and we'll bash up the orcs together.
We'll try to win the battle, but if it starts looking bleak, that's when we'll go to Plan B, where, basically, we abandon the town, regroup where the treants are, and focus on defending them. We'll probably need to call upon human aid if it comes to that, so I'll contact Cabal the Adventurer and have them help us rub out the Orc Lord.
He's just as much of a threat to them as he is to us, so I'm sure they'll step up to help.
Of course, this is all dependent on forming an alliance with the Lizardmen. You're gonna be key to that, Ci.
Make it happen.
Yes, my lord. Ci nodded back at me.
I had faith he'd come through, certainly.
Right.
In that case, feel free to talk to the Lizardman Chief whenever you can.
Just make sure we're both equal partners in this alliance.
Nobody's serving anyone else.
I understand, he said, then promptly disappeared, as if fading into the shadows.
He works fast, doesn't he?
Good. Now, if Ci messes up his job, we'll jump right to Plan B.
I want all of you to be prepared for that, should it come to it. The rest of the room nodded in agreement.
"Thank you all for accepting my sudden request," Thraney said, bowing low in my direction.
"I will do my best to ensure this relationship is beneficial to us both."
"Oh, no, same to you," I stammered.
She smiled a little in reply, perhaps finding my hesitation cute or something.
"We will meet again, then, leader of the monsters, or Soraimaru, I should say."
Then she was gone, casting her own magic to return home. So we had our orders.
It'd be great if we could form that alliance, but if not, we'd have to think on our feet a little.
By the way, Soraimaru, have you any interest in contacting Gable again? Good question, Hakuro. I think I'd like to save that for Plan B, when we get to seeking human support.
But the kingdoms are gonna need time to mobilize their forces when push comes to shove, huh? You think maybe we could just tell them there's an Orc Lord out there for the time being? It sounds like a good idea, my lord.
I will leak word to the kobold merchants. They will spread it well enough after that. Thanks. That should work for now.
They'd probably want some solid evidence about the Orc Lord's birth before joining forces with us, besides. Rigard was already outside of our conference room hut, carrying out my orders. Even as Goblin King, he still ran around all day like a chicken with its head cut off.
Things were starting to happen. It was beginning to make me nervous, but there was no point stewing over it. We had to do what we could, and right now, that meant we had to prepare.
An Orc Lord, though, huh?
Sounded pretty tricky.
Stealing people's skills sounded awfully unfair, not that I was really one to talk.
But I had been sweet-talked into confronting him, and I couldn't disappoint Thraney now.
I wasn't at all sure about my chances, but I had made the agreement, and I'd go at him with everything I had. If I screwed this up, I'd have no chance of carrying out the promise I made to Shizu. I had to think about the future, even if the thought depressed me a bit.
The Orcish army stormed across the forest, feet stamping against the soil, entire trees toppled along the way.
"Destroy them! Destroy them! Destroy them! Destroy them!" Such was the thunderous chant of the orcs as they marched along, their yellow eyes sparkling with rage.
They were not capable of thought in the normal way.
In their eyes, anything that moved was prey.
They were eternally hungry, and the whole of their consciousness was devoted to filling their empty stomachs. Whump! Another one down. Those surrounding him were overjoyed. They had prey now.
At one point, they might have been friends, but now, he was just a slab of something edible. He looked like he was still breathing, but all that meant to the others was that his meat was fresh. Those lucky enough to have been marching alongside him immediately took to taking the body apart. The liver was taken to the leader of their little group, with the rest snatched up on a first-come, first-served basis. Crunch, rip, smack. The air was quickly filled with the repulsive sounds of flesh and bone being torn apart.
They were forever hungry. And the hungrier they got, the more powerful they became in battle.
That, right there, was the hidden benefit of the unique skill known as Ravenous. The more orcs that fell and were eaten, the hungrier the survivors grew, the stronger it made the entire army. They numbered 200,000, a city's worth of famished slaves under the Orc Lord's rule.
There would be no salvation for them, as they worked feverishly to fill their stomachs. It was all too futile an effort in this endless hellscape.
Now the homeland of the ogres was before them.
The orcs were D-ranked monsters.
The ogres, with a grade of B, made them cower in fear. Never in their dreams would they dare challenge them to a fight.
But look at them now.
Destroy them! Destroy them! Destroy them! Destroy them! They never stopped.
If anything, the hunt for prey made them go faster.
Their comrades fell as the ogres raged, exercising the full brunt of their powers, slashing them apart, caving in their skulls with the handles of their axes.
But all it meant was that the orcs suddenly had a bountiful supply of fresh meat. They were thrilled, hoping against hope that it had helped stave off the hunger for at least one passing moment. An ogre fell.
Several orcs immediately pounced, bathing in his blood as they gnawed at his body.
But, it didn't work. It filled nothing. But now look. The orcs' bodies were changing. The power of the ogre was now within them.
And now the ogres were swallowed up by the supposedly inferior orc hordes, screaming their last, pained at the seeming uselessness of their powers. And slowly but surely, some among the orcs began to manifest new, unexpected abilities.
The strength of the companions I eat becomes my own. The power of the prey I consume becomes my own. The eating continued. None were afraid of death. Any sense of fear in their minds had been consumed right alongside the flesh of their comrades. And the power flowing within them was now making its way to the king. Their king. The orc lord, the one at the top of the food chain. The march continued.
Their next prey was right in front of them.
The lizard man chief shuddered when he heard the report.
The thing he feared most was now reality. According to the messenger, the stronghold of the powerful ogre race was destroyed before the day had even ended.
As if swallowed whole by the orc horde. There was no longer any doubting it. The orc lord was here.
In terms of sheer statistics, these were still D-ranked orcs, 200,000 of them or not. 10,000 C+ level lizardmen, playing on their home turf in the marshes, had every chance of fighting evenly, or better. But if the thing he feared the most, an orc lord, was on the scene, nothing about them was D-rank any longer. If they had completely overwhelmed the ogres, that was an indicator of their power, from the guy up top, all the way down to the lowliest peon in the army. They may not be as powerful as ogres, no, but you could put a plus sign next to that D, at the very least. And any orcs who were at knight level or higher would be at least a C hell. At this point, they might be leaning towards C+, matching the lizardman's grade.
It would be hard enough to fend off such a massive army attempting to strike them at their weakest link. But if there was no meaningful difference in strength at the infantry level now, they had no chance. The presence of the orc lord meant that holing up in the caverns and attempting to weather out a siege would be pointless.
It was one thing if they had reinforcements, but shutting off all potential exits would simply make the lizardmen starve, not the orcs.
They would simply have to throw themselves against them. It was a bitter decision for the chief, but one that had to be made.
Gable, sent away to gain the goblins' support, had yet to report back.
They couldn't waste time searching for him, it would only make their foes even more of a threat. The chief began to fear that he would have to lead the forces himself. A soldier ran up, shouting,
"Chief!
We have an intruder.
He wishes to meet with you in the limestone grotto entrance."
The chief's guards readied their spears in response. "Calm yourselves," he said. He could feel the presence of a strong aura nearby, more powerful than anything he had felt before, and he realized it wouldn't pay to do anything to stoke its owner's anger.
Any battle would lead to untold casualties, most likely, and he couldn't detect any hostility to the aura anyway.
"Whoever it is," he said as he composed himself, "he is very brave, coming here alone. I would like to see him. Bring him over." "But what about the risk, my lord?"
"This aura is on the level of a magic bonds.
If we wish to drive him away, we will have to pay dearly for it."
"He does not seem to be an immediate threat, so we have no reason to immediately threaten him. Shall we line the chamber area with our elite troops, then? Please."
"But I want no one to move an inch until I give the order. Make that clear."
"Yes, my lord." The chief nodded to his royal guard and waited for the uninvited guest to appear.
They were in a natural labyrinth, one with countless hidden nooks and crannies.
If this magic-born level foe attempted to cause any trouble, they would have ways of handling it, if it came to the worst-case scenario, that is.
The chief's hope was that they could talk this out instead.
Now the aura drew nearer, its size telling the chief everything he needed to know.
"Anything foolish," he thought, "and not even 100 of my elite force may be enough to defeat him."
After a few more moments, one of his men brought a single monster into his chamber. He was dark-skinned, his hair black with hints of blue, and eyes a lighter blue that were cold as ice. He was about as tall as your average lizard man, not gigantic by monster standards, but he looked composed, impervious, ready for anything. The power he seemed to exude was overwhelming in itself, even as he was surrounded by several lizard man warriors to keep him in check.
100 other troops were stationed around the chamber, ready to leap at this visitor whenever their chief instructed. The chief looked at the visitor, then resigned himself. If this goes wrong, he thought, I may have just wasted the lives of everyone in this room.
Such was the extent of this monster's aura, exponentially larger than anything he knew.
My apologies, the chief began.
We have been so busy with our own preparations that I fear I cannot provide you with the proper courtesy you deserve.
May I ask what brings you here? His choice of words angered the younger lizardman in the chamber.
What need was there for all this politeness before a complete unknown like this? The chief appreciated their concern, but now he was anxious.
If they did anything to displease this visitor, they may